Emily opened her eyes slowly. The hospital lights were too bright, and everything felt blurry. Her body ached, and she could still feel the dull pain from the surgery. She looked around the empty room. Something felt wrong. Ryan, her fiancé, wasn't there. He had promised he would be waiting when she woke up. A nurse came in and looked at her with a strange mix of pity and worry. She walked over and gently placed a folded piece of paper in Emily's hand. "He asked me to give you this," the nurse said softly before walking away. Emily opened the note with shaking hands. The words hit her like a punch to the chest. "This isn't working. Don't call me." Her breath caught. Her eyes filled with tears, but no sound came out. She was too tired, too confused, and too full of pain to even cry properly. Her phone sat on the tray beside her. She grabbed it with weak fingers. She had messaged Ryan hours ago. No reply. Her last message still showed as "read." Rain started tapping against the hospital window. Soft at first, then heavier. Emily stared at it, numb, wondering how everything had fallen apart so fast. Then, a small notification popped up on her phone. One new email. The subject line read, "Confidential final offer, $12 million. Her eyes widened. She blinked. Was she dreaming? She tapped on the message, her finger trembling. It was real. The offer was real. A big pharmaceutical company wanted to license her invention, the patch she had worked on for years. Her invention, her future, lying in that cold hospital bed, abandoned and drugged. Something in her heart shifted. Ryan had left her at her weakest, but she wasn't weak. Not really. That night, she signed the deal from her phone. Ryan didn't know it yet, but he had made the biggest mistake of his life. She didn't just lose a fiancé. She found her freedom and $12 million. He had left her behind, but she was about to rise higher than he ever imagined. Alone. Not anymore. She was about to become unstoppable. Just one day before everything fell apart, Emily was full of hope. She was finally about to introduce her life's work to the world, a low-cost insulin patch that could change lives for millions of people. Years of research, endless late nights, and countless failures had led her to this moment. She had poured everything into this project, her time, her energy, her savings. It wasn't just science, it was personal. Her younger brother had struggled with diabetes his whole life, and Emily had promised herself she would find a better way to help people like him. Emily wasn't doing it alone. Her fiancé, Ryan, had been by her side the whole time. He wasn't a scientist like her, but he was smart and good with money. He had taken the role of CFO in their small startup, handling the finances and business meetings while she stayed in the lab. They made a good team, or so she thought. Lately, though, Ryan had been acting different. He seemed distracted, distant. Every time she brought up the upcoming product demo or their wedding plans, he brushed her off or changed the subject. Emily told herself it was just stress. Launching a startup was hard. Planning a wedding was harder. Maybe he just needed time. But during lunch that day, something happened that she couldn't ignore. They were sitting at their usual spot, a quiet cafe near their office. Emily was showing him the final files for the presentation, her slides, the data charts, everything they needed to convince investors and partners that the patch was ready. Ryan leaned over her laptop, smiled, and then, somehow, hit the delete key. The entire folder vanished. "Oops," he said casually, not even looking concerned. "You have a backup, right?" Emily stared at him, stunned. She did have a backup, but that wasn't the point. Why was he so calm? She brushed it off and told herself not to overthink it, but that wasn't the only thing. Later, as they walked back to the office, Ryan's phone rang. He looked at the screen, his face unreadable, and then stepped away to take the call. Emily watched him from a distance. He turned his back to her and kept his voice low. When he came back, he smiled again, too quickly. "Just a vendor," he said. Something in her gut twisted. She wanted to ask questions, but again, she stayed quiet. She didn't want to start a fight. Not now. Not when they were so close to success. But deep down, she already knew something wasn't right. And within 24 hours, her entire world would fall apart. Lying in her hospital bed, Emily replayed Ryan's voicemail again and again, her heart sinking deeper each time. His voice, once comforting, now felt cold and distant. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way," he said, "but I did what I had to do. You were always the genius, Emily, but I'm just better at finishing things." Her hands trembled, her stitches ached, but nothing hurt more than those words. He hadn't just left her, he had stolen everything. In the message, Ryan admitted to transferring all her patents, her invention, her years of hard work, into his own name. Then he went behind her back and pitched her insulin patch to a rival pharmaceutical company. He sounded proud, like he'd pulled off something clever, like it wasn't theft, but strategy. You were always buried in the lab, his voice continued. You don't get how the game works. I handled the paperwork. I made the deals. You wouldn't have gotten this far without me. But that wasn't true. She had trusted him. She had let him sign things for the company, handle the legal side, believing he was helping her. Now she realized what he had really been doing, using her trust to quietly move everything into his control. And the worst part? He had forged her signature. A nurse entered to check her vitals, but Emily barely noticed. Her mind was racing, replaying every meeting, every document Ryan asked her to just skim and sign. Every time she thought he was looking out for them both. He hadn't just broken her heart. He had stolen her life's work. The betrayal was so deep it made her feel sick, worse than the pain from the surgery. It wasn't just personal, it was professional. It was criminal. She thought about calling him, screaming, crying, demanding answers. But then she looked at the email on her screen again, the one offering her $12 million for the patch. Ryan thought he'd beaten her. He had no idea she had already signed the deal, and he was about to find out just how dangerous it was to betray a woman who had nothing left to lose. The hospital room was quiet, except for the steady beeping of machines and the soft rain against the window. Emily stared at the email on her screen, the words burning into her mind. Confidential, final offer, $12 million. She had read it 3 times already, still not fully believing it was real. The offer was from Genovax, a massive pharmaceutical company she had admired for years. They wanted to license her insulin patch, the very one Ryan had tried to steal. Her fingers hovered above the screen, her heart pounding. Then her phone rang. It was Dr. Marcus Lee, her former mentor from graduate school, a brilliant mind and one of the few people she trusted. She hadn't spoken to him in months, but his name brought a flicker of comfort. "Emily," he said, his voice warm. "I just heard Genovax is trying to license an insulin patch, the one you showed me years ago. Is this you?" She paused. He didn't know. No one knew what Ryan had done. "Yes," she said softly. "It's mine." Marcus sounded excited. "They're serious. If you can come to LA, they want to finalize everything in person. They're talking real numbers." "I can't travel right now," Emily said, glancing at her IV line and bruised arms. "But I'm ready to move forward." She could almost hear his smile. "How fast can you be in LA?" Emily smiled faintly. "Tell them I'm in. I'll sign today." Marcus promised to relay the message and hung up. Emily took a deep breath and opened the contract attached to the email. She read it slowly, carefully, making sure every detail was in her favor. She wasn't going to be tricked again. Then, from her hospital bed, she signed the deal. $12 million. Her name, her invention, no Ryan. She hit send. Across the city, Ryan had no idea any of this was happening. He thought he was in control, probably celebrating with the rival firm he had pitched her work to. He thought she was weak, still recovering, too broken to fight back. But that was about to change. Within hours, Genovax would announce their new partnership, and they wouldn't be naming Ryan. They'd be naming her, Emily Carter, lead inventor, CEO of her future. Ryan's betrayal had pushed her to the edge, but it had also forced her to stand on her own. And now, she was making her move. This wasn't just revenge. It was power. The next morning, Emily woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing non-stop. Messages, emails, and notifications flooded the screen. Her deal with Genovax had just gone public, and it was everywhere. The first headline she saw made her blink in disbelief. She was left behind and signed a fortune. Below it was a photo someone had snapped of her in the hospital, lying in bed with an IV still in her arm, her laptop open as she signed the $12 million licensing deal. Her tired eyes, the sterile room, and the faint scar on her neck told a quiet, powerful story. The world was eating it up. Another headline read, "The genius behind the patch, betrayed but not broken." Social media exploded. People praised her strength, her resilience, her brilliance. Comments poured in. "She's a legend. Imagine getting dumped post-surgery and still walking away with $12 million. New role model unlocked." Emily sat up slowly, still sore. but feeling something new rise inside her. Power. She had been left alone, heartbroken, and drugged, and yet here she was, making headlines across the country. She had gone from forgotten patient to biotech star overnight, but not everyone was celebrating. By noon, Ryan's former firm, where he had pitched her stolen work, released a short statement. They called the situation a misunderstanding, claimed it was a paperwork mix-up, said Ryan had simply been acting on behalf of the company. Emily didn't respond with words. She sent them an email containing time-stamped files, emails, and digital records showing Ryan had forged her signature on patent transfers and licensing agreements. She also included a screenshot of the voicemail he left confessing everything. The tone shifted instantly. Their lawyers sent a warning. So did Ryan's. But they were too late. The internet had already taken a side, and it wasn't theirs. Public outrage spread faster than any lawsuit could. People demanded accountability. Comment sections filled with fury. A viral reply under the firm's apology post read, "So your plan was to steal from a woman recovering from surgery. Classy." News outlets began digging deeper. Old interviews with Emily resurfaced. Clips of her speaking passionately about affordable insulin went viral. She wasn't just a victim, she was a visionary. As the story grew, Ryan went quiet. No posts, no statements. Emily didn't say much either. She didn't need to. Her story was louder than anything he could say. She hadn't just signed a deal. She had taken back her voice, and the world was listening. Just when Emily thought the worst was behind her, a message appeared in her inbox from an old intern, Jake, quiet and sharp, who had worked with her last summer. The subject line read, "You need to see this." Attached was a video file. Emily clicked play. It was grainy security footage from the office hallway. The timestamp was from 3 weeks before her surgery. The footage showed Ryan entering her private office late at night. He used his own keycard and stayed for over an hour. When he left, he was holding a USB drive and a stack of folders. He never mentioned it. He never had a reason to be in there. Jake's message was simple. "I thought you should know. I found this when I was cleaning out my files. I never liked how he treated you." Emily sat still for a long moment. She wasn't surprised, but now she had proof. It wasn't just betrayal, it was sabotage. And now, it was criminal. A few days later, she received a call from an investigator with the SEC, the US Securities and Exchange Commission. Word of the forged patents and stolen data had reached them. They wanted to ask Emily some questions under oath. She agreed without hesitation. On the video call, the investigator looked serious. "Miss Carter, we've received credible information that your former business partner may have committed fraud, forgery, and misrepresentation to potential investors. We'd like your cooperation." Emily nodded, calm, steady. "You'll have it." She forwarded every document she had, every forged form, the voicemail, the emails, the security footage. She organized everything by date and type. By the time she finished, the SEC had a full case file. At the end of the call, she added one more thing. "Can charges include emotional damages?" she asked. The investigator looked surprised for a second, then smiled faintly. "We'll see what we can do." Emily ended the call and leaned back in her chair. Ryan had tried to erase her, but now every lie he told was being exposed, one piece at a time, and she was the one holding the spotlight. The courtroom was silent, except for the shuffle of papers and the occasional creak of chairs. Emily sat straight, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Across from her, Ryan leaned back in his seat, wearing that same smug smile she'd seen too many times. It was the first time they'd seen each other since the hospital. He looked polished, calm, confident, like he thought this would go his way. He didn't know what was coming. Emily's lawyer stood and pressed play on a small recording device. Ryan's voice filled the courtroom. "I did what I had to do. You were always the genius, Emily, but I'm better at finishing things." There it was. His own words, his confession, his betrayal, caught forever in digital ink. Ryan's smile vanished. Emily didn't look at him. She didn't need to. She had already lived through the heartbreak. This was about justice now. Her lawyer followed up with the documents, the forged signatures, the timestamp, the security footage, the stolen files. Each piece built on the last until the picture was undeniable. Ryan had taken her work and tried to pass it off as his own. The judge, a stern woman with sharp eyes, flipped through the folder in front of her. After a long pause, she looked up. "Miss Carter, Based on the evidence presented, this court recognizes you as the sole legal owner of the insulin patch patent. All rights and claims belong to you. Emily let out the breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The judge continued, her tone firm. Mr. Grant, pending further investigation, your assets will be frozen. Any attempt to transfer funds, claim ownership, or interfere with Miss Carter's intellectual property will be considered contempt of court. Ryan started to speak, but his lawyer pulled him back. It was over. Emily stood, calm and steady. As she walked out of the courtroom, the weight on her chest finally began to lift. Ryan had tried to silence her, steal her voice, her work, her future. But now, in front of everyone, the truth was clear. He had nothing, and she had it all. Her name, her invention, and her power. The night of the launch party was electric. Lights glowed across the rooftop garden, music hummed in the background, and a banner stretched above the crowd. Welcome to Carter Biosolutions. Emily stood near the edge, watching the city below. Just months ago, she'd been in a hospital bed, heartbroken, stitched up, and nearly erased. Now she was CEO of her own biotech company, built from the $12 million licensing deal that had changed everything. Around her, investors mingled with scientists, journalists snapped photos, and her team passed out the first package boxes of their insulin patch. Sleek, affordable, and ready to save lives. The product was real, her vision was real, and it was all in her name. She clutched a glass of champagne, her fingers still bearing the faint marks from her IV scars. A few feet away, her old mentor, Dr. Marcus Lee, raised his own glass and nodded at her with pride. She took the stage, the crowd quieting almost instantly. "I want to thank everyone who believed in this," she said, her voice clear and steady. "And also, those who didn't." A ripple of laughter moved through the guests. Emily smiled, but it was a quiet, knowing smile. To anyone who's ever been discarded, underestimated, left behind, don't wait to be chosen. Choose yourself. There was a beat of silence, then applause, loud, rising, unstoppable. She raised her glass. "We're just getting started." The crowd roared. That night, the first shipment of insulin patches went out to hospitals and clinics across the country. Affordable, life-changing, and branded with her company's name. No one could erase her now. Reporters tweeted quotes from her speech. Photos of her standing on stage in her black suit, smiling under the lights, went viral within hours. One caption read, "She turned betrayal into a biotech empire." Emily stayed until the last guest left, the stars visible now above the skyline. She took a moment to breathe in the cool night air. This wasn't just revenge, this was rebirth. Ryan had tried to end her story, but all he really did was light the beginning. Ryan stared into the camera, his face pale, eyes tired. His once perfect image, sharp suits, smooth words, and false charm, was gone. The video he posted was shaky, filmed in a dim room with closed blinds. He began with a sigh. "I made mistakes," he said, voice low. "I was under pressure. I didn't mean to hurt anyone." He talked for nearly 10 minutes, trying to explain, to twist the story, to make himself sound like the victim. But no one was buying it. The internet didn't forget, and it definitely didn't forgive. The comments poured in fast, brutal, unfiltered. "This you," linked to his voicemail confession. "Imagine leaving someone in a hospital and waking up broke." He thought he was the main character. "You didn't make a mistake. You made a plan." The post went viral, but not in the way he wanted. Every article now attached his name to words like fraud, theft, and disgrace. The company he tried to steal from issued a statement cutting ties. His bank accounts were frozen, his reputation in ruins, lawsuits circled like sharks. He applied for jobs. No one called back. He emailed old contacts. Most didn't answer. A few replied with 2 words, "Never again." His social media pages became ghost towns, abandoned except for angry comments and screenshots of his downfall. Even people who once praised him had turned their backs. And Emily? She said nothing. No statement, no tweet, no interview where she even mentioned his name. Her silence spoke louder than anything else could. In a world addicted to responses, to drama and clapbacks, Emily's complete lack of attention was the final blow. Ryan had tried to erase her, and now he was the one forgotten. One magazine headline summed it up perfectly. Ryan who? Emily moved on with her company, her team, and her mission. While Ryan fought lawsuits and public shame, she was building something that would last. He tried to ruin her, but in the end, he made her impossible to ignore. while becoming completely invisible himself. No revenge post, no name drop, no attention, just silence. And that silence was deafening. It was nearly midnight. The office was quiet, lit only by the soft glow of a desk lamp and the distant lights of the city outside. Everyone had gone home hours ago. Emily sat alone, surrounded by framed patents, launch photos, and a shelf filled with awards she never expected to win. In the top drawer of her desk was something she hadn't touched in months, a small, folded piece of paper. The note Ryan left her in the hospital. Her fingers hovered over it for a second before pulling it out. She unfolded it slowly. The words were still there, messy and rushed. "This isn't working. Don't call me." She stared at it, but this time there was no pain, no sting, just clarity. She read it once more, then let out a small laugh under her breath. Not bitter, just tired and maybe a little grateful. If he hadn't left, she whispered to herself, I might have stayed small. She meant it. If Ryan had stayed, she might have waited for him to lead, trusted him to make the big decisions, let him dim her light just to keep the peace. Maybe she never would have signed that deal, never started her own company, never found out just how strong she was. Sometimes, the worst thing that happens to you is the exact thing you need to break free. She held the note over the candle on her desk. The paper caught flame slowly, curling at the corners before the fire took over. She watched as the words disappeared, turning black, then to ash. When the flame died down, she opened the window. A breeze moved through the room, pulling the smoke out into the night. The city lights blinked in the distance, endless and alive. Somewhere, people were still talking about her story, about how she rose, about what she built, about what she survived. But here, in this quiet moment, there was no spotlight, no applause, just peace. Emily closed the window, sat back in her chair, and smiled. Not because she'd won, but because she finally knew she never needed him to. He had to leave, so she could begin. Do you think Ryan got what he deserved in the end? Or should Emily have confronted him face to face instead of staying silent? Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. And if you want more stories like this, full of betrayal, revenge, and sweet justice, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a moment.